I used to be intimidated to paint nighttime scenes in watercolor. Now it's one of my favorite subjects to paint. So today we're going to talk about how to paint a nocturne. A few things to keep in mind when painting a nocturne scene. The first one is to use fresh paint out of the tube. It's really hard to get a dark mixture of paint. And so if you can, use some fresh paint out of the tube. It makes things a lot easier when you need to mix a very rich, dark mixture in watercolor. Now the second thing is to use less water. So typically what I do is wet down both sides of my paper before I start. I don't want to do that in this type of a scene. And the reason is, the more water that you use, the more drying that happens. And the more drying that happens, the more fading happens. Now another thing to remember is, if you don't get your values dark enough, it is okay to glaze over them. Now a glaze just means I'm painting over something that has already dried in order to make it a darker value. Now it's okay to do this, so don't be afraid to do that if you realize that part of your scene has dried weaker than you want it to. But if you can mix and compensate for the drying and try to reach that value on your first try, it will make your painting more fresh, and you have less chance of overworking it if you are able to reach that value on your first try. So with these tips in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at a recent night scene that I painted. So here's a view of the scene that I'm going to paint here, and here is my drawing of that scene. Now, like I mentioned before, I'm not pre-wetting my paper like I typically would, and so when I'm going around the painting, I'm dropping in the lightest values of my scene. So if there's a place where the street lights are showing and there's some warm color on the road, I want to lay those values in this stage of the painting. So I'm thinking about my light. And as I move up into the sky, I know that I'm going to come over the sky again. So I'm just laying a cool, thin wash of blue up here. And I'm going to come back through and lay a dark sky in over that when I get to that point. So something that was important to me in this scene was the bright color of the tree. The light was shining on this tree here, and I wanted to make sure and highlight that in this painting. And here I'm painting the warm areas of light on the street. And also something I thought was interesting is the contrast between the green, almost a green light off in the distance, and the warm street light that was up closer. So I'm introducing some darks, but I know that this foreground needs to be pretty dark. Okay, now I've mixed up a very thick mixture of paint for my sky. And so as I bring the sky down, I need to start thinking about the parts of my first wash that I want to leave behind. And now I've switched to some green, and I'm adding in this tree here, and I'm skipping over little bits of the bright part of the tree that I want the light to be hitting. I'm leaving some of that behind in this wash. And as I get down towards the horizon, I need to start cutting around a few little highlights in the background. So for the darks on this house and other parts of this middle part of my painting, I want to connect that to the sky wash. So I'm going to move into that area at this point. And now, even though the sky was very dark, a very dark wash, I'm taking some even thicker pigment while it's still damp, and I'm adding a layer of trees up above this building on the right side of the painting and back around those houses as well. And that helps me to kind of frame in those houses a little bit better. So I'm connecting that sky right into the shadow side of this building as well. And now as I get this dark sky in and some of the dark trees around it, you're starting to get a sense of light. And that's exactly what you want in these scenes. And now I realized that the foreground needed to be darker still. So I'm glazing over that using some quick brush marks to make that area a little darker. So here I'm taking my palette knife and I'm scratching in some power lines, adding in a few more darks and details around these houses in the middle of the painting, adding some more directional lines to lead the viewer into the scene a bit more. A little more detail on the building and a shadow that makes it more convincing. And finally, I'm adding a few touches with some white gouache. A few more details here and there. And here is a look at the final painting. I hope that you found this video helpful in painting nighttime scenes. Don't be intimidated. If you use a lot of pigment, if you pay attention to values, these can be really fun, engaging, unique subjects to paint. And I wanted to mention, if you haven't seen my free video lesson, 8 tips to avoid overworking your painting, take a look at it. You can follow the link below, or you can get to it in my bio on Instagram. I've gotten some great feedback from this video lesson, and it's been very helpful to solve a big problem that I have had to deal with, and that is overworking your painting. So take a look at my free video lesson, and I'll see you next time.